How a single door almost triggered chaos at America's Supermax prison. Chapter 1. The door was not supposed to open. At 2:14 a.m., deep inside America's most secure prison, a single steel door slid back with a low metal sound. No alarm rang. No guard touched a button. No code was entered. The door simply opened. On the security screen, the hallway beyond the door was empty. Clean. Silent. But the system flashed red around the edges, warning signs screaming without sound. Inside the control room, every monitor froze for half a second. Then they came back online. And that half second was enough. A guard named Thomas Miller leaned forward in his chair. He had worked at the Supermax for 12 years. He had seen riots in other prisons. He had seen men scream and beg and threaten. But he had never seen this. The screen labeled Sector D, in a corridor, showed the door fully open. That door led to a restricted path between cell blocks. A path that, if crossed at the wrong time, could allow inmates to see each other, to communicate, to plan. At a Supermax prison, that was the worst thing that could happen. Thomas reached for the radio. Before he could speak, another alert appeared. Lock sequence interrupted. Then another. Manual override, unknown source. Thomas's heart started to race. If one door opened, others could follow. And if that happened, control could be lost in minutes. He called for the shift supervisor. Within seconds, guards crowded the control room. Faces tight. Eyes fixed on the screens. The supervisor, Mark Reynolds, asked the question no one wanted to answer. Who opened it? No one replied. The system log showed no badge scan. No fingerprint. No command. Just one line of text. Access granted. Mark felt a chill run down his back. That door had one purpose. It stayed closed so inmates stayed alone. Isolation was the rule. Silence was the control. And now silence was breaking. Down the hallway, an inmate stood in his cell, awake. He had heard the sound. A sound no inmate ever heard. A door opening where no door should open. He stepped closer to the small window in his cell door. Far away, another inmate did the same. They could not see each other. But they knew. Something was wrong. Back in the control room, Thomas zoomed in on the camera. The door was still open. The supervisor ordered it shut. Thomas hit the command. Nothing happened. He tried again. The system did not respond. A quiet alarm started blinking on the main panel. Not loud, not dramatic, but deadly serious. System dezinc. Mark knew what that meant. The prison's systems were no longer fully talking to each other. Doors, cameras, locks, lights. They were drifting out of sync. This prison was built so that nothing happened by accident. Every movement was planned. Every door was timed. A single mistake could trigger chaos. And now that mistake was already happening. The supervisor ordered a lockdown of nearby sectors. Some doors closed. Some did not. One camera feed went black. Then another flickered. Thomas whispered, "This is bad." Mark did not answer. He was staring at a different screen. A screen that showed the open door from another angle. In that angle, something new appeared. A shadow. It moved slowly across the floor near the open doorway. There was no person on the camera. Just the shadow. Mark leaned closer. Zoom in. Thomas did. The shadow stopped. Then disappeared. At that moment, every inmate light in Sector D turned on at once. Inmates stood up inside their cells. Not shouting. Not banging. Just standing. Waiting. Mark realized then how close they were to losing control. All it would take was one more door. One wrong signal. One mistake. And America's most secure prison would no longer be secure at all. The supervisor slammed his hand on the desk. Find out who did this. Now. Thomas pulled up deeper system logs. Hidden logs. Logs that were not meant for normal staff. As the data loaded, his face went pale. There was a name in the system. A name that should not have been there. A former systems engineer. Transferred years ago. Files sealed. Access revoked. The name blinked on the screen. And at that exact moment, the open door began to slide wider. As if inviting something through. Thomas looked at Mark and whispered, "This wasn't a mistake." Before Mark could respond, the lights in Sector D went out. Every screen in the control room flashed white. And somewhere inside the prison, another door unlocked. The lights came back on one by one, but they did not come back the same. Some were dim. Some flickered. Some stayed dark. Inside the control room, the air felt heavy. No one spoke. Radios hissed with quiet static, like they were afraid to make noise. Mark Reynolds took a slow breath. Status, he said. Thomas Miller checked the main panel. His hands shook as he spoke. Power surge in Sector D, backup systems kicked in, but not clean. Some locks are still not responding. How many doors? Mark asked. Thomas swallowed. 3 confirmed. 1 fully open. 2 unlocked but still closed. That was enough to make everyone in the room tense. At a Supermax prison, unlocked doors were almost as bad as open ones. Mark turned to another guard. Get a response team moving. Quietly. No sirens. No announcements. The guard nodded and left. Deep inside Sector D, the hallway was empty again. The open door stood still, frozen halfway back. The air smelled like metal and cleaning chemicals. Inside one cell, an inmate named Daniel Price sat on his bed. He had not moved since the lights went out. Daniel was not a loud man. He was not violent anymore. But he was smart. And he knew rules. The rule was simple: doors do not open. When they do, something has gone very wrong. Daniel stood slowly and walked to the door of his cell. He pressed his ear to the cold steel. Far away, he heard it. Footsteps. Not guards. Different. Slow. Careful. Daniel's heart began to pound. Across the corridor, another inmate, Robert Hayes, felt the same thing. He had been asleep when the lights came on. He stood now, hands clenched, eyes sharp. Robert had spent years alone. Silence had taught him patience. And patience had taught him to listen. He heard the faint sliding sound of metal. Not his door. Another one. Back in the control room, Thomas stared at the log scrolling down his screen. There's activity, he said. Someone is sending commands from inside the network. Mark snapped his head toward him. From where? Thomas shook his head. I don't know. It's like the system thinks it's talking to itself. Mark felt a cold knot in his stomach. That should not be possible. This prison was built with layers. Physical locks. Digital locks. Human locks. No single person could break all of them. Unless they already knew how. Thomas zoomed in on the access signature again. The same name flashed once more. Not logged in. Not active. But present. Like a ghost. Mark remembered the briefing from years ago. A systems engineer who helped design part of the door control software. Brilliant. Quiet. Fired after raising concerns no one wanted to hear. Officially, all his access was removed. Officially. Can you shut him out? Mark asked. Thomas typed fast. Trying. The screen froze. Then a message appeared. Command denied. Thomas whispered. It's blocking me. At that exact moment, the open door in Sector D moved again. Just a few inches. Enough. In the hallway, the shadow returned. This time, the camera caught more. A boot. A pant leg. A human leg. Mark's voice rose. Who is in that corridor? No one answered. Because no one was supposed to be. The response team reached the outer gate of Sector D. They stopped when their radios crackled. Static. Then a voice came through, broken and weak. Control, this is Team 2, our door won't. The signal cut out. Mark felt panic rise, but he forced it down. Panic made mistakes. Miller, he said, manual override. Full lockdown. All sectors. Thomas hesitated. Sir, if the system is desynced. Do it, Mark said. Thomas pressed the command. For a second, nothing happened. Then alarms exploded through the prison. Red lights flashed. Heavy doors slammed shut all over the building. Inmates backed away from their cell doors as the sound echoed like thunder. In Sector D, the hallway door slammed closed with a violent crash. The shadow vanished. Silence returned. Everyone waited. 10 seconds. 20. 30. Thomas exhaled. Locks are holding. Mark leaned back slightly, his heart still racing. Then a new alert appeared. Smaller. Quieter. More dangerous. Internal override active. Mark stared at it. That shouldn't exist, he said. Thomas's face went pale. Sir, there's a message. From who? Thomas read it slowly. From the system. Mark frowned. What does it say? Thomas looked up, fear in his eyes. It says, one door was a warning. Before anyone could react, the lights in Sector D went out again. And this time, they did not come back on. Darkness swallowed Sector D. No flicker. No emergency glow. Just black. In the control room, every screen showing Sector D went dead at the same time. Thomas Miller's fingers hovered over the keyboard. We lost visual, he said quietly. Mark Reynolds felt his jaw tighten. Backup cameras. Gone, Thomas replied. Power is there, but the feed is blocked. It's like someone put a hand over our eyes. Mark turned to the radio. All units, report in. Anyone in Sector D, respond now. Only static answered. Deep inside the DAC, Daniel Price stood very still in his cell. He could not see his hands. He could not see the walls. But he could hear. Breathing. Not his. Down the corridor, Robert Hayes felt the same thing. He backed away from his door until his shoulders touched the cold wall. He had learned long ago that fear made noise. He forced himself to slow his breath. A soft click echoed through the darkness. Then another. Cell doors were unlocking. Daniel felt his door move. Just a little. The metal slid with a low groan. He whispered, "No, no." His door stopped, half an inch open. Enough to feel air from the hallway. Enough to know this was real. In the control room, Thomas slammed his hand on the desk. They are unlocking doors without sending a signal. It's not coming from the panel. It's inside the hardware. Mark's mind raced. Can we cut power completely? Thomas shook his head. If we do, mechanical failsafes release. Doors default to manual. Mark cursed under his breath. That would be worse. Suddenly, a single monitor flashed back on. One camera. Grainy. Black and white. It showed the hallway in Sector D. Someone was standing there. A man. Middle-aged. Calm. Wearing plain clothes, not a uniform. He looked directly into the camera. Mark's blood ran cold. Who is that? Thomas whispered. That's impossible. The man raised his hand and tapped the camera lens. Then he smiled. Good evening. A voice came through the speakers in the control room. Clear. Steady. Too calm. You should have listened when I warned you. Mark grabbed the microphone. Identify yourself. The man tilted his head slightly. You already know who I am, Mark Reynolds. Mark froze. No one in the prison knew his full name. You fired me, the man continued. You signed the paper. You told me my concerns were theoretical. Thomas looked at the personnel file pulled up on his screen. Sir, it's Evan Cole. Systems engineer. Terminated 7 years ago. Mark's hands trembled. How are you inside my prison? Evan chuckled softly. Inside. Mark, I never really left. The camera feed shifted. Evan walked down the hallway, passing cell after cell. Red emergency lights flickered on behind him, like the prison itself was bleeding. Inmates are locked in boxes designed by code, Evan said. And code remembers its creator. In Sector D, Daniel watched as light returned in thin red lines under his door. Footsteps passed his cell. Slow. Confident. Robert Hayes pressed himself into the corner of his cell. He heard keys jingle. Not guard keys. Different. Evan stopped in front of a cell. Robert's cell. The lock clicked. Robert held his breath. The door slid open. Evan stood there, smiling calmly into the darkness. Robert Hayes, he said gently. Still angry. Robert did not move. Who are you? Someone who believes cages should be tested, Evan replied. Back in the control room, Mark shouted. Evan, stop this. You don't know what you're doing. Evan looked back at the camera, as if Mark stood in front of him. I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm proving a point. What point? Mark demanded. That your perfect prison, Evan said, hangs on a single door. And tonight, every door is listening to me. As if on cue, alerts began to stack on Thomas's screen. Cell unlocked. Cell unlocked. Cell unlocked. Thomas's voice cracked. Sir, multiple cells in Sector D are opening. Mark felt the floor drop beneath him. In the darkness of the cell block, more doors began to slide open, one by one. Metal screamed against metal. And the inmates stepped out. The silence inside ADX Florence shattered. The first man stepped into the hallway barefoot. Then another. Then another. Their faces were pale under the red emergency lights, eyes wide, blinking like animals pulled out of cages. Daniel Price stayed inside his cell. He did not move. He had learned that freedom could be a trap. Robert Hayes stepped back as Evan Cole calmly moved aside, giving him space. Go on, Evan said softly. You're free to stand. Not free to leave. Not yet. Robert swallowed. You're going to get people killed. Evan's smile faded for the first time. No. I'm going to show them how close they already are. In the control room, alarms screamed non-stop. Mark Reynolds slammed his fist on the console. Lock down the entire facility. Seal blast doors. Thomas shook his head, sweat dripping down his face. His overriding faster than we can respond. He built backdoors into subsystems we didn't even know existed. Then cut communications, Mark ordered. Kill the internal network. Thomas hesitated. If we do that, we lose tracking, cameras, everything. Mark looked at the dark screens. We already have. Thomas pulled the switch. The room went quiet. No alarms. No voices. Just the hum of backup power. Deep in Sector D, Evan stopped walking. Oh, he said, almost disappointed. You finally pulled the plug. He turned to the inmates now standing in the hallway. Some were frozen. Some were smiling. Some were shaking. Listen carefully, Evan said. This is not your night to riot. This is not your night to run. This is your night to remember. One inmate laughed nervously. Remember what? That control is fragile, Evan replied. And fear travels faster than violence. Suddenly, boots thundered from the far end of the corridor. A response team. Shields up. Rifles raised. Faces hidden behind visors. Down on the ground, a guard shouted. The inmates froze. Daniel felt his heart hammer. He dropped to his knees inside his cell, hands on his head. Robert slowly lowered himself to the floor. Evan stayed standing. The guards stopped when they saw him. Who the hell are you? The team leader demanded. Evan raised both hands calmly. I'm the reason your radios went dead 5 seconds ago. As if on cue, the guards' radios crackled, then fell silent. The team leader swallowed. Stand down, he muttered to his men, unsure. Evan stepped forward. You won't shoot. Not yet. Because you don't know how many doors I still control. He tapped a small device clipped to his belt. Somewhere above them, a heavy steel door slid open with a deafening crash. The sound echoed through the prison. In the control room, Thomas stared at a new alert flashing on a backup terminal powered by an isolated circuit. Sir, he whispered. He just opened a maintenance corridor. One that connects 3 sectors. Mark felt cold. That corridor was never meant to be used during lockdown. Thomas nodded. Exactly. In Sector D, Evan turned back to the inmates. Time to go back to your cells. No one moved. I said, Evan repeated, his voice sharper now. Go back. Slowly, fear overcame curiosity. One by one, the inmates retreated, slipping back into their cells like ghosts. Daniel pulled his door shut with shaking hands. It locked behind him with a heavy click. Robert sat on his bunk, breathing hard, staring at the closed door as if it might disappear. The guards watched, stunned, as order returned without a single shot fired. Evan smiled again. See, chaos doesn't need violence. Just timing. The team leader raised his weapon. You're coming with us. Evan nodded. Of course. As they moved to restrain him, every light in Sector D suddenly went out again. Total darkness. And Evan's voice echoed one last time through the black. Tell your bosses. The prison blinked first. Then something heavy slammed shut somewhere deep inside ADX Florence. And no one knew who, or what, had just been locked in. The lights came back on one by one. Not all at once. First the hallway. Then the guard station. Then the cameras. Inside his cell, Daniel Price sat very still, his back against the cold wall. His hands were still on his knees. He did not move until the familiar hum of power settled into the floor beneath him. ADX Florence was breathing again. Outside the cells, boots moved fast. Guards shouted short commands. Radios crackled back to life, loud and angry, as if trying to make up for the silence. Sector D secured. Inmates accounted for. Suspect in custody. Daniel closed his eyes. Suspect. That word stayed with him. Down the corridor, Evan Cole was forced to his knees. Zip ties bit into his wrists. A hood was pulled over his head. Careful, Evan said calmly. You tighten those any more, and you'll regret it. The guard ignored him. They dragged Evan away, toward the same corridor door he had opened minutes earlier. In the control room, Mark Reynolds watched the live feed return. His face looked older now, lined and tight. Where is he? Mark asked. Being transferred to isolation, Thomas replied. His voice shook. Level 0. Mark stiffened. That wing hasn't been used in years. It's the only place not connected to the main system, Thomas said. No smart locks. No network access. Steel and keys only. Mark nodded slowly. Good. I want him buried in concrete and silence. Thomas hesitated. Sir, he knew things. About our systems. About response timing. About doors that don't even show on blueprints. Mark turned to him. Then someone gave him that knowledge. Silence filled the room. Elsewhere, The heavy maintenance corridor door finally sealed shut with a deep metallic boom. Inside it, Evan smiled under the hood. Level 0 smelled old. Concrete. Dust. Cold metal. They shoved Evan into a cell and slammed the door. A real door. No keypad. No scanner. Just a lock that turned with a thick iron key. The guard leaned close. Enjoy the dark. Footsteps faded. Evan sat on the floor, alone, breathing slowly. Perfect, he whispered. Back in Sector D, Daniel lay on his bunk staring at the ceiling. Sleep would not come. The prison had always felt solid. Unmovable. Untouchable. Tonight, it had blinked. Daniel thought about Evan's words. Asterisk control is fragile. Asterisk. Across the hall, Robert Hayes whispered through the vent, his voice shaking. Did you see that? Did you see what he did? Daniel didn't answer. Robert continued, desperate. If one man can do that, what else are they hiding from us? Daniel turned his face to the wall. In another wing, a guard named Lisa Moreno sat alone in a break room, hands wrapped around a cup of untouched coffee. Her radio sat silent beside her. She had been on duty for 7 years. She had never felt afraid like this. Because tonight wasn't a riot. It wasn't an escape attempt. It was a message. In the control room, Thomas replayed logs on a secure terminal that had not been touched during the blackout. What is it? Mark asked. Thomas swallowed. Sir, the lockdown failure didn't start when the door opened. Mark's jaw tightened. Then when? Thomas turned the screen. A timestamp blinked back at them. The breach had begun ***, 6 minutes earlier ***. Before Evan stepped into the hallway. Before alarms. Before chaos. Mark felt a slow chill crawl up his spine. That's not possible. Thomas whispered, unless he wasn't working alone. The screen flickered. For a brief second, a line of text appeared, something that had not been typed by anyone in the room. ***, system check complete ***. Then it vanished. Far below the prison, behind concrete and steel, Evan Cole leaned back against the wall of his cell, eyes closed. The real test, he knew, had only just begun. The message stayed on Mark Reynolds's mind. System check complete. He stared at the blank screen long after it disappeared. The control room felt smaller now. The walls felt closer. Run a full audit, Mark said. Every system. Every terminal. No shortcuts. Thomas nodded and started typing fast. His fingers shook. All outside connections are cut, Thomas said. No internet. No external lines. Then whatever did this is already inside, Mark replied. That was the problem. ADX Florence was built to stop the worst criminals in the country. Thick walls. No contact. No trust. And yet, something had moved through it unseen. In level 0, Evan Cole counted his breaths. The cell was old. Older than the rest of the prison. The walls were rough, carved before cameras ruled everything. The light above him buzzed faintly. He stood and walked slowly around the room, dragging his fingers along the concrete. No cameras, he said softly. No sensors. He smiled again. They thought this place was safe because it was outdated. They were wrong. Back in the main housing unit, Daniel Price finally slept. But not for long. A loud bang jolted him awake. Metal on metal. Another bang followed. Daniel sat up. The lights were still on, but something felt wrong. The air felt heavy. Then the intercom crackled. All inmates remain in cells, a voice said. This is a routine security check. Routine. Daniel had heard routine before. This wasn't it. Down the hall, guards moved fast again. Too fast. One of them stopped near Daniel's cell, whispering into his radio. We've got a problem in maintenance, the guard said. Door sensors just triggered. Another voice replied, sharp and nervous. Impossible. That wing is locked. They are reading as open, the guard said. All of them. Daniel's stomach tightened. Maintenance corridors ran behind the prison. Old paths. Forgotten paths. Paths without cameras. In the control room, alarms did not sound. That scared Mark more than anything. No alarms, Thomas said. But doors are showing open. Physically open. Mark slammed his fist on the desk. Send eyes. Now. In level 0, Evan sat on the floor again. He pressed his ear to the wall. Footsteps echoed far away. Not guards. Too light. Too careful. He whispered. On time. Somewhere behind the walls, a panel slid free. A hand reached through. Daniel heard shouting. Not screams. Commands. Then silence. The lights flickered once. Just once. That was all it took. Cells across one wing unlocked with a soft click. Daniel's door did not open, but he heard others. Metal sliding, air rushing, doors freeing men who had not stood outside a cell in years. A voice whispered down the hall. Stay quiet. Follow instructions. Daniel froze. That voice did not belong to a guard. In the control room, Thomas stared at the screen, eyes wide. Sir, I'm losing feeds. How many? Mark demanded. All of them, Thomas said. One by one. The screens went black. Mark whispered. This was never about one door. In level 0, Evan Cole stood up as the lock on his cell turned. The door opened slowly. He stepped into the dark corridor and smiled. ADX Florence had gone quiet again. And this time, it wasn't going to wake up easily. Silence filled the prison. Not the normal kind. Not the controlled, quiet ADX Florence was known for. This silence felt wrong. In the control room, Mark Reynolds stood frozen as the last screen went black. The soft hum of machines was gone. Even the backup monitors were dead. Emergency power. Mark asked. Thomas tried. Nothing happened. No response, Thomas said. His voice cracked. It's like the system doesn't exist anymore. Mark took a slow breath. Panic would kill them faster than any inmate. Manual protocol, he said. Lockdown teams. Physical sweep. Now. Guards moved fast. Radios crackled with confused voices. Orders overlapped. No one could see the whole picture anymore. That was the danger. In the housing wing, Daniel Price stood at the back of his cell. He did not move toward the door. He knew better. Across the hall, another cell door creaked open. A man stepped out slowly. Older. Thin. Eyes sharp. Daniel recognized him. Not by face, but by reputation. Caleb Morris. A man who had not spoken to another inmate in 10 years. Caleb looked down the hall, then back at Daniel. Stay inside, Caleb whispered. Daniel didn't ask why. He listened. Footsteps came from the far end of the corridor. Slow. Calm. Not guards. A shadow moved along the wall. Then a voice spoke, low and controlled. This is not a riot. Follow instructions and you will live. Daniel's heart pounded. That voice again. In the maintenance tunnels, 3 figures moved through the dark. They wore prison uniforms, but their movements were too precise. Too trained. One of them stopped at a metal door and tapped twice. The door opened from the other side. Evan Cole stepped into the tunnel. You're late, he said. We had to reroute, one man replied. They almost saw us. Evan smiled. Almost doesn't matter. He looked down the tunnel, listening. They think this is chaos, Evan said. But this is control. In the control room, Mark finally got one radio channel to respond. We've lost Wing C, a guard shouted. Cells open. Inmates moving in groups. Engage lockdown gates, Mark said. They won't respond, the guard replied. Manual gates are jammed. Mark felt cold spread through his chest. This was not a mistake. This was a plan. Back in the housing wing, Daniel heard boots running. Real boots this time. Guards rushed in, weapons raised. Down on the floor, one shouted. Caleb dropped instantly. Daniel followed. A guard moved past Daniel's cell, then stopped. Sir, the guard said into his radio. This door never opened. Another voice replied, tense. Then someone wanted it closed. The lights suddenly shut off. Total darkness. Shouting broke out. Metal slammed. Then one sharp sound cut through everything. A scream. Daniel pressed his face to the floor, heart racing. When the lights came back on, one guard lay still in the hall. His radio hissed beside him. In the tunnel, Evan Cole checked his watch. Phase 2, he said. Somewhere deep inside ADX Florence, a heavy steel door began to open. A door that had not moved in 20 years. And behind it was something the prison was never meant to release.